The teachings of Epictetus are sharp, relentless, and unyielding. They confront us, challenge us, and strip away the illusions we cling to. At the heart of his philosophy lies a simple, yet deeply uncomfortable truth: most of what we obsess over, grieve for, and strive to control is not ours. It never was, and it never will be. Yet, we spend so much of our lives clinging to these shadows, building our identities and happiness around things that are utterly fragile, fleeting, and beyond our grasp. Why do we do this? Why do we willingly enslave ourselves to what was never truly ours? Let's begin with the fundamental insight Epictetus offers us. We are only in control of certain things: our thoughts, our choices, our actions, and how we respond to the world. Everything else, our relationships, possessions, health, reputation, and even our own bodies, falls outside of our control. These things, no matter how much we cherish them, are simply on loan. They are gifts from the universe, or if you prefer, the gods, and they can be taken back at any time. Yet we live as if they are permanent fixtures of our lives, as if we own them outright, and because of this we suffer. Imagine for a moment that someone lent you a beautiful vase. You admire it, care for it, and display it proudly in your home. Then one day the owner comes to take it back. Would you rage against them? Would you cry out that it was unfair? Or would you accept that it was never yours to begin with? Epictetus tells us that life is filled with these vases. Your wealth, your career, your relationships, even your own body. These are all vases temporarily placed in your care. Yet, how often do we rage, weep, and despair when these things are taken from us, as if we had some divine right to keep them forever? This brings us to a critical question: what does it mean to live in harmony with this reality? If we accept that most things in life are not ours, how do we navigate a world that constantly tempts us to attach ourselves to these illusions? Epictetus offers a radical solution: stop caring about what isn't yours. But this is not a call to apathy or indifference. It is a call to freedom, to care deeply about what is truly within our control, and to let go of the rest. Because when we care about what isn't ours, we surrender our peace, our freedom, and our ability to live fully.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Think about the last time you were angry, anxious, or heartbroken. What caused it? Was it something that was truly within your control, or was it tied to something outside of it, perhaps someone else's actions, a lost opportunity, or a change in circumstances? How much of our suffering stems from our refusal to accept the limits of our control? We spend so much energy trying to bend the world to our will, yet the world is not ours to command. And when it resists us, as it inevitably does, we suffer. Epictetus tells us that freedom is not about doing whatever we want. It is about not being enslaved by what is outside our control. It is about reclaiming our power over the only things that are truly ours: our thoughts, our choices, and our actions. But this is easier said than done. Let's not pretend otherwise. It is one thing to understand this intellectually and another to live it daily. How do you let go of attachment to your loved ones? How do you accept the loss of your reputation or the betrayal of a friend? How do you face illness, poverty, or death without despair? These are not easy questions, and Epictetus does not offer easy answers. But he does offer a path that requires discipline, courage, and a willingness to confront the uncomfortable truths of life. Let's take relationships as an example. We often define ourselves by our relationships, our roles as parents, partners, friends, or colleagues. We invest so much of our happiness in these connections, and when they are threatened or lost, we feel as if our very identity is being torn apart. But Epictetus reminds us that these relationships are not truly ours. They are gifts, not possessions. Your child, for example, is not your property. They are an individual with their own thoughts, choices, and destiny. To love them is not to control them, but to support them in their journey, even when that journey leads them away from you. This doesn't mean you shouldn't care about them, it means you should care in a way that respects their independence and your own peace of mind. Or consider your reputation. How much of your time and energy is spent worrying about what others think of you? How often do you let their opinions dictate your choices? Epictetus would ask whose opinion matters more, yours or theirs. If you are living in alignment with your values, why does the judgment of others trouble you? Their thoughts are not yours to control. And if you base your self-worth on something as fickle as public opinion, you are building your identity on sand. The winds of gossip, envy, and misunderstanding will erode it in no time. And what about material possessions? How much of our identity is tied to what we own? How often do we equate our worth with our wealth, our status, or our achievements? Epictetus would ask what happens when these things are taken away. If your sense of self crumbles without them, were they ever truly yours? We live in a world that constantly tempts us to chase more money, more success, more recognition. But at what cost? Are we trading our peace of mind for things that are ultimately beyond our control? There is a profound irony in all of this. The more we cling to what isn't ours, the more we lose ourselves. We become trapped in a cycle of desire, fear, and disappointment. We become slaves to external circumstances, always at the mercy of forces beyond our control. And in doing so, we neglect the one thing that is truly ours, our inner freedom. So how do we break free from this cycle? Epictetus offers a practical approach. Every time you find yourself upset, ask yourself, is this within my control? If the answer is no, let it go. This is not an act of resignation, but of empowerment. It is reclaiming your energy and attention for what truly matters. It is choosing to focus on what you can control, your thoughts, your actions, your character, and letting the rest take care of itself. But this is not just about avoiding pain. It is about finding joy and meaning in what is truly yours. When you stop caring about what isn't yours, you free yourself to care deeply about what is. You discover the beauty of living in alignment with your values, of acting with integrity, and of finding contentment in the present moment. You realize that true happiness does not come from possessing the world, but from mastering yourself. Yet, this path is not without its challenges. It requires us to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world. It requires us to let go of the illusions we have built our lives around. And it requires us to cultivate a discipline of mind that is rare in a world that constantly pulls us in the opposite direction. But the rewards are profound. Imagine a life where you are no longer enslaved by fear, anger, or desire. Where you can face loss, betrayal, and even death with equanimity. Where your happiness is not dependent on the whims of fortune, but grounded in your own choices and values. This is the freedom Epictetus speaks of. This is the freedom that comes from letting go of what isn't ours. And so I leave you with a question: what are you holding on to that isn't yours? What is it costing you? And are you willing to let it go, not as an act of loss, but as a reclaiming of your own freedom? Because in the end, the only thing you truly own is yourself, and that is more than enough. When we talk about letting go of what isn't ours, it's crucial to understand the depth of what Epictetus is asking of us. This is not a surface-level adjustment or a simple change in perspective. It is a transformation of how we see the world and our place in it. It is not about turning away from life, but engaging with it on its own terms, without illusions, without false expectations, and without clinging to what was never ours to keep. This is hard, it is uncomfortable, but it is also liberating. Let me ask you this: why do you suffer? Reflect on this question honestly. Is it because life is inherently cruel, or is it because you resist the way life unfolds? If we are honest with ourselves, most of our suffering does not come from the events themselves, but from our refusal to accept them. We fight against reality, demanding that it conform to our desires, and when it doesn't, we feel wronged. But what right do we have to demand that the world bend to our will? Who promised us that life would always go as we want? Epictetus is clear our suffering is not caused by external events, but by how we interpret and respond to them. It is not the loss of a loved one, a failed ambition, or a betrayal that causes us pain. It is our attachment to the idea that these things should not happen, that we deserve something different or better. This attachment is the root of our suffering, and until we address it, we will remain in chains enslaved, not by the world, but by our own minds. But how do we free ourselves from these chains? The answer lies in a radical shift in focus. Stop worrying about what the world does or doesn't give you. Stop obsessing over things you cannot control. Instead, turn your attention inward. Focus on your own thoughts, actions, and character. This is where your power lies. This is where freedom begins. Take a moment to consider how much energy you waste on things outside your control. How often do you replay old arguments in your head, wishing you had said something different? How much time do you spend worrying about what others think of you, or whether you'll get the promotion, the relationship, or the recognition you crave? And what does this achieve? Does it change the outcome? Does it bring you peace? Or does it leave you exhausted, anxious, and frustrated? Epictetus tells us that this is madness. To invest our happiness in things we cannot control is to hand over our power to forces that care nothing for us. It is like building a house on quicksand. No matter how strong the walls are, the foundation will always give way. And yet we do this every day. Why? Because we are afraid. We are afraid to confront the reality that we control so little. We are afraid to face the truth that life is uncertain, unpredictable, and often unfair. But denying this reality does not protect us from it. It only makes us more vulnerable. So what does it look like to let go of what isn't ours? It starts with a simple but profound realization: you are not your possessions. You are not your relationship. You are not your reputation, your career, or even your body. These are things you have, not things you are. They can be taken from you at any moment. And if your sense of self is tied to them, you will crumble when they are gone. But if you recognize that your true self lies in your ability to think, choose, and act, then you will find a strength that no external force can take away. This does not mean you should stop valuing the things in your life. Love your family, pursue your goals, take care of your body. But do so with the understanding that these things are not yours to control. They are gifts, not guarantees. Appreciate them while they are here, but do not build your happiness on their presence. Because the moment you do, you set yourself up for suffering. Let's take an example to make this clearer. Imagine you are holding a cup of water in your hands. You can appreciate its coolness, its clarity, and its ability to quench your thirst. But if someone takes it from you, what happens? Do you rage against them for stealing what was never truly yours? Or do you accept that the cup was not yours to begin with and move on? Life is filled with these cups. Your possessions, your relationships, your health, these are all cups temporarily placed in your care. You can enjoy them, but the moment you start believing they belong to you, you have lost your freedom. Now, let's talk about control. What does it really mean to control something? Epictetus would tell us that control is not about bending the world to our will. It is about mastering ourselves. It is about choosing how we respond to the world, no matter what it throws at us. This is where true freedom lies, not in changing the external, but in mastering the internal. But this is not easy. It requires discipline, self-awareness, and a willingness to confront our deepest fears. It requires us to stop blaming the world for our problems and take responsibility for our own happiness. This is a radical idea, and it can be uncomfortable. But think about the alternative. Do you really want to spend your life being tossed around by forces you cannot control? Do you want your happiness to depend on the whims of fortune, the opinions of others, or the ever-changing circumstances of life? Or do you want to reclaim your power and find peace within yourself? This brings us to an uncomfortable truth. Letting go of what isn't ours often means letting go of our illusions. It means accepting that life will not always go as we want. It means acknowledging that we are not as powerful or important as we like to believe. But it also means finding a deeper, more lasting source of strength and peace. Because when you stop caring about what isn't yours, you free yourself to care deeply about what is. You stop wasting energy on things you cannot control and focus instead on building your character, living with integrity, and finding joy in the present moment. But let's not sugarcoat this. Letting go is painful. It requires us to confront our attachments, our fears, and our insecurities. It requires us to face the possibility of losing the things we care about most. But this pain is a necessary part of growth. It is the price we pay for freedom, and in the end, it is worth it. Imagine a life where you are no longer enslaved by fear, anger, or desire, where you can face loss, betrayal, and even death with equanimity, where your happiness is not dependent on the whims of fortune, but grounded in your own choices and values. This is the life Epictetus invites us to live. It is not an easy life, but it is a free one. So I leave you with this question: what are you holding on to that isn't yours? What would happen if you let it go? And are you willing to take the first step toward freedom, even if it means confronting some uncomfortable truths? Because in the end, the only thing you truly own is yourself, and that is more than enough. The journey of letting go of what isn't ours is not just about detachment, it's about discovering what is truly ours and reorienting our lives around it. When we strip away the noise of the external world, its demands, its distractions, its false promises, we are left with the one thing that cannot be taken from us: ourselves. But what does it mean to own ourselves? What does it mean to live in a way that is rooted in what is truly ours? Epictetus tells us that the only things within our control are our thoughts, our choices, and our actions. Everything else, our possessions, our relationships, our health, even our own bodies, is subject to forces beyond us. This is a humbling realization, but it is also liberating. Because if our control is limited to ourselves, then our happiness, our peace, and our freedom are also within our control. They are not dependent on the external world. They are not gifts that can be given or taken away. They are our birthright, but only if we claim them. Let's take a closer look at what this means in practice. Consider the role of responsibility in your life. How often do you blame others for your unhappiness? How often do you point to circumstances, people, or events as the cause of your suffering? Epictetus would challenge you to look inward. He would ask, are you suffering because of what has happened, or because of how you are choosing to respond to it? This is not to deny that the world is often unjust or that life can be deeply painful. But the question remains, who is ultimately responsible for your inner state? Is it the world or is it you? This is a radical shift in perspective. It is far easier to blame the world for our problems than to take responsibility for our own minds. But blaming the world is a dead end. It changes nothing. It gives away our power. Responsibility, on the other hand, is the key to freedom. When we take full responsibility for our thoughts, our choices, and our actions, we reclaim our power. We stop being victims of circumstance and become the authors of our own lives. This does not mean we can control everything that happens to us. Far from it. But it does mean we can control how we respond. And this response is where our freedom lies. Consider this: you cannot control whether someone insults you, but you can control whether you let their words affect you. You cannot control whether you lose your job, but you can control whether you see it as a catastrophe or an opportunity. You cannot control whether you are betrayed, but you can control whether you let bitterness consume you or whether you rise above it. This is the power of owning yourself. It is not about controlling the world, it is about controlling your relationship to the world. But this kind of self-mastery requires discipline. It requires us to train our minds in the same way we might train our bodies. Just as physical fitness is achieved through consistent effort and practice, so too is mental fitness. We cannot expect to wake up one day and suddenly be free from anger, fear, or desire. These habits of mind are deeply ingrained, and changing them takes time and effort, but the rewards are profound. Imagine the strength of a mind that is not swayed by external events. Imagine the peace of a heart that is not enslaved by desire. Imagine the freedom of a soul that is not bound by fear. This is what Epictetus offers us, but only if we are willing to do the work. One of the most powerful tools for this work is reflection. Epictetus often encouraged his students to reflect on their day, to examine their thoughts and actions, and to ask themselves whether they had lived in alignment with their values. This practice is just as relevant today as it was in ancient times. How often do you take the time to reflect on your life? How often do you ask yourself whether you are living in a way that is true to who you are? And if not, what is holding you back? Reflection is not about judgment or self-criticism. It is about awareness. It is about understanding where we are and where we want to be. It is about identifying the attachments and illusions that are keeping us from living freely and making the conscious choice to let them go. This is not easy. It requires honesty, courage, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. But it is also deeply empowering. Because the more we understand ourselves, the more we can take ownership of our lives. But what does it mean to live in alignment with our values? It means prioritizing what is truly important over what is fleeting or superficial. It means focusing on the things that are within our control, our thoughts, our actions, and our character, rather than chasing after things that are not. It means living with integrity, acting with kindness, and striving for excellence in all that we do. It means letting go of the need for approval, the fear of failure, and the desire for things that are beyond our control. And it means accepting life as it is, rather than as we wish it to be. This is not a call to passivity or resignation. It is a call to engagement, to live fully, but without attachment, to care deeply, but without clinging, to strive for excellence, but without desperation. This is the paradox of freedom. The less we cling to what isn't ours, the more fully we can embrace what is. But let's be clear, this way of living is not for the faint of heart. It requires a kind of courage that is rare in a world that constantly pulls us in the opposite direction. It requires us to let go of our illusions, to face our fears, and to take full responsibility for our lives. It requires us to stop blaming the world for our problems and to start owning our responses to them. And it requires us to cultivate a discipline of mind that is not easily swayed by the temptations and distractions of the external world. But the rewards are immeasurable. Imagine a life where you are no longer enslaved by fear, anger, or desire, where you can face loss, betrayal, and even death with equanimity, where your happiness is not dependent on the whims of fortune, but grounded in your own choices and values. This is the life Epictetus invites us to live. It is not an easy life, but it is a free one. And so, I leave you with one final question: what would your life look like if you stopped caring about what isn't yours? What would change if you focused all your energy on what is truly within your control? And are you willing to take that first step, to let go of what binds you, and to embrace the freedom that comes from owning yourself? Because in the end, this is the only life you have. And the only thing that is truly yours is the way you choose to live it.